Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Our current session focuses on diachronic variation. I hope and expect that by the end of this session you would be able to understand the term diachronic variation, and you would also be able to understand what is its scope in sociolinguistics. Well, my dear students, diachronic linguistics is one of the two main temporal dimensions of language study that were identified by Saussure. Diachronic variation deals with language change over time. Principal concerns of diachronic linguistics include to describe and account for observed changes in any language over time. Well, as far as the term itself is concerned, the term diachronic is derived from, again, Greek origin. And, if you look at the screen, you would find the dia part from Greek is taken, which means throughout. And the chron part that is taken from Greek, again, means time. So, diachronic is in relation to time, throughout time, in relation to time, through the times, or throughout time. So, it more, what I would say is takes a historical context. It is more about how a particular language or more than one languages or all the languages, etc. have evolved through the times, how changes have occurred in them as they have passed through different time periods. Diachronic linguistics has emerged in itself as a discipline because of its significance and of its scope, and it looks at language development and language changes through the history. What does it map? It maps shifts and fractures and mutations of languages over the centuries. To explain that, what I would say is, take the example of language A, for example. Many centuries back, language A would have a particular form and a particular shape, and it would have certain characteristics and certain features. Now, these characteristics and features would change as it would pass through different times. From one, period of time, as it would gradually move on to the other period of time, there would be shifts, there would be changes, there would be certain things, there would be certain elements, certain features or characteristics that would evolve, that would be modified. Some things would be dropped on the way, some new things would be picked up on the way through certain processes like language contact, that is happening over the times. And what diachronic variation looks at is the diachronic aspect of study of language would see how this variation is taking place, what are the factors that have played a role in that, and what is the result of the influence of those factors at different time points. So overall, throughout, the times, how it has emerged. In gross outline, it is similar to evolutionary biology, which maps the shifts and transformations of rocks. Actually, I would like you to have two examples here. One example is this one that I'm talking about, the evolutionary biology, where, how, rocks are formed. These biologists would study how through the times, these rocks have taken different shapes and forms, and how their size has changed, and how their colors have changed, and what are the factors in the surrounding environment that had affected them. So in the same way, diachronic linguistics would look at languages, how they go through, all these changes over times. So, the second example, before I would take the example of English language itself, the second example that I would give from general life is, if you think of any plant, and if you look at, if you take the stem of the plant and you cut it from the middle, what you see in the center, once you cut it, once you slice it, and you just observe what is in there, that is synchronic approach. What is exactly at that particular time point in its growth, what is there? You are looking at that. Whereas, diachronic approach to the study of that plant would be how from a seed to a grown-up plant, how it has gone through different stages, what has happened to it, what forms and shapes it has taken, what are the changes in the color. So, from the beginning to, a certain stage, you would look at that whole process of how it has evolved. Now, after these general examples, I am coming to an example from a language, and I've chosen English language for this purpose, tracing the development of English language from the Old English period to the 20th century. If we look at it from diachronic study perspective, we can notice certain changes. We can also notice why there are certain patterns which cannot simply be discerned without looking at a language, at a certain point of time, because you need to go back into the history to understand why it has happened so over times. These changes can be of all types. Now they can be of all levels. They can be phonetic changes, phonemic changes, morphological, syntactic changes, and semantic changes as well. For example, when it comes to phonetic changes, Old English had the sound u, umlaut, while the sound is no longer present in the English of the modern English times. When it comes to phonemics, Old English regarded f and v both as, allophones, that is, different pronunciations, different variants of the same phoneme. But today's English has f represented by f and v represented by v as separate phonemes. When it comes to syntactic changes, Old and Middle English have V2 word order. An example of the Middle English is where, if you look at the screen, now, that was written as this, is in the first position, and the verb look, that was written, it as I have encircled here, in the second position. So now would come in the first position and look would come in the second position. Whereas, if you look at the screen, you can see how it would occur in a sentence. Now look every man toward himself. Think for a moment and you would realize we do not speak like this today. We do not bring this now at the beginning and look to follow it. How do we use it? Now it's for every man to look to himself. Notice the positioning. So, this change in the positioning, this change in the structure from Old and Middle English to the modern times is an example of what can be studied in diachronic linguistics. From the semantic perspective, when we look at diachronic studies and diachronic linguistics, what we can notice is how the meanings of words change over time. Actually, every word has a lot of connotations that are attached to it and different senses of meanings that are attached to it, which keep on changing over the times. A very interesting example from Old English is of the word girl. If you look at the screen, the word girl. It is very interesting that in the Old English, the word was used to refer to young men and women. Yes, the word girl was used to refer to young men and women. The criteria was what? Young. Be it a man or a woman, they would be called girls. Another example is of the word awful, as you look at the screen. Originally meant inspiring wonder or fear. It was used originally as a shortening of full of awe. Whereas if we look at it today, the word usually has negative connotations. Another example of this semantic variation diachronically is of the word silly. If you look at the screen, as it was written in Old English like this that I have underlined, it meant happy or fortuitous. And by the 15th century, the sense of then it was started being used in the sense of deserving pity, and then it developed to another meaning that is ignorant, feeble-minded. And today, how do we use it? Today we use the word silly as more like a synonym to the word foolish. So, notice how differently, how starting from the word happy, which is a completely different meaning, reaching a meaning which is foolish. So, how it has happened over the times and how it has occurred as a change semantically in terms of meaning, this is a diachronic variation that has happened semantically. Cultural diachronic study of English thus may involve spelling differences over times, pronunciation differences over times, diachronic varieties of languages, and above all, the vocabulary choices, how different words are added into language at different time points. For example, if you go 5 centuries, or for that matter 1 century back, the word mouse had a different meaning semantically, but now this vocabulary item has a different meaning, and it is also related to computers, for example. So, diachronic variation is a variation that occurs in any language over the times throughout the process of change taking place in the history. And diachronic linguistics is the study of this diachronic variation.